Hello everybody, I thought I'd take an opportunity to show the milking bale that I had made for my goats. I primarily made it for milking, but it has a bunch of other uses. You can see my model here, Cheese. She always loves to go in the bale because she's getting fed. So something that's a little bit different than a lot of the milking bales that I tend to see online is that I've made mine from steel. I think that that's a much better way to go for a host of reasons. I know that not everybody is always confident doing metalwork as a DIY, but you know, if you can start doing that, you are going to get a lot of good results. So I'll just go through how I've built this one and what makes it sort of quite good. As you can see, the floor is made from checkerboard steel. I just happen to have that. I found that from a recycling place. If you didn't have that, because it can be quite expensive and difficult to get, you could also use something like a mesh, like a steel mesh. I wouldn't want to go too much bigger than 25mm mesh though, because you want to make sure that the goat's feet aren't going to fall through. You could also go with a wood as a floor, but the problem with the wood is it's not as easy to clean. I can hose this down very easily and it's get it a lot cleaner than if it was wood, that's a lot more porous sort of thing. So I've got it elevated, and the reason for that is when I am actually milking the goats and I want to try to get into the udders, I don't want to be on the ground. I like to be able to sit on a seat just outside from there. I have a bit of a ramp that they can access with. This is just from some floor mesh, but again, you could also just use regular grid mesh or some other frame that you could make. As to how it actually works, what I have done is I have fabricated a bracket sort of system here, which then has this tub, which is just actually a flower pot that I got from the local hardware store, and I just sized up the rack to fit accordingly. If you can see, Cheese will let me. Nope, doesn't want to. You can see it's just a frame that this pot sits in. The general dimensions aren't super critical. I've made it fairly tall, but I've got Nigerian Dwarf goats, so you know, they are fitting quite small, but sometimes if I have another goat like a Saanen or something like that, where I might want some extra height. So it's about 800mm high, and the mechanism by which it works is I have two vertical columns. One is stationary, and these are 30mm box section steel, which is just bolted through a frame that is held of 20mm box section steel. And this is just bolted at the top and bottom, but the other leg is only bolted down with a single bolt, such that it's kept relatively loose and the whole thing can swing. So all I just need to do is convince Cheese to come back in. Cheese! Well, I'll see if I'll get her later. But all she'll do is, as she comes in to feed, she'll put her head through. I can close that, and then I can just set how much I want it closed based upon these chain links here. So if you had a larger animal and it had a thicker neck, you could just do it that way, sort of thing. So as you can see, Cheese is restrained as these arms come together. As she tries to back out, her head can't come through. One of the things that I haven't needed to do, but it could be something that you would consider, is depending on if you're going to have a variation in the size of your goats. Say for instance, sometimes when we have younger kids, as we get quite close, even still, it's a little bit too much of a gap there. And that would be able to be solved by simply drilling a series of holes, say one here, say at a 80mm gap, 100mm gap, 125, 150, etc. And then that way, if you needed to tailor it, you could simply just unbolt this here, move the movable arm over, and then you'd be able to adjust. I've not had to do that yet. There's been no need, but if I did, that was what I would do to modify it. Okay. So this is the model that I have created of the milking bale. I've made it in SketchUp. I can make this file available in the video description so that you can come and look at a view only sort of link for it. I have modeled this on my one, but it is not particularly important. You can check the dimensions, but the dimensions are generally not critical for most of this. I made it about 350 millimeters tall because I had a steel that was about that high, and that's about what I needed for my sort of what's comfortable for me when I'm sitting down. But if you're shorter or taller, or you have a different sort of landscape, then that might be different. Also, I got this piece of steel from the recyclers. It was already the size that it was. So I sort of tailored the bale around that. It's 650 millimeters wide, but you could go more narrow than that if you wanted, or wider if you want, I suppose. It doesn't really matter. It just depends on what you want to make yours to size and what materials you have, really. And it's about 1.2 long. It's about 900 tall, but it probably doesn't need to be, depending on the height of your goats. I generally find these dimensions can be somewhat more critical. I think that's about 250 millimeters. You can check there. And the flower pot is 400 millimeters from the actual platform. That seems to be a good height, especially for my dwarf goats, so they can actually get their head in there. So yeah, I'll share this and you can use the dimensions accordingly. I will also touch on the fact I didn't really talk about the other benefits of steel other than that it's easy to clean. The big thing is this is stable and this will not rot. When you have a bale that's made of timber, it's out in the weather, it's warping, it's rotting, it's getting mildew, all that sort of stuff, it's going to, I mean, not always, but it's going to be far more likely that you're going to end up with either these sections here or the arms somewhat rubbing and buckling, and then it's just going to sort of become harder to move it. You're more likely to get splinters, they're more likely to warp. Steel gets rid of a lot of that. I mean, yes, obviously steel can rust, but I've used galvanized steel. It's going to last for way longer. So, and as I was saying before, I'm comfortable with metalworking, so I've done a lot of welding. So, these brackets here, they're welded on. This arm is welded on, etc. Gotta get the guy out of the way. Um, but you could just bolt here if you're more comfortable. And this 45-degree section, I've done that with welding, but you don't really need it. If you could find a suitable bracket that already has a brace structure in it, you could probably get away with that. I mean, you could just do a lot of this with cutting and welding. Also, I will say, like I said, I've modeled this off my one. I happen to have some spare round tubing, which meant that I had to do coping and all that sort of stuff here for the actual braces. You don't need to do that. Use steel. Use square steel. You're going to find it a lot easier. But I just modeled off what I have. So if there is a lot of interest for it, I can actually produce a different drawing to make it available with some plans so that we can use some more commonly available size steel and some more common bits that you would get. So then you could follow a actual plan with actual cut lists, but it just depends on if there's interest or not. All right. Thanks for watching.